Welcome to US Rail Journeys, Series 3. So far in this series, I've travelled 6,684 miles on Amtrak's Silver Star, the Crescent, the Texas Eagle, the Lakeshore Limited, and the Acela. I'm now having a day in Boston before flying home. I checked out of my hotel, the Doubletree downtown here in Boston, at a very comfortable, very large room. And now, having left my baggage in storage there, I'm taking a walk to see what Boston looks like. It's a beautiful morning, not a cloud in the sky. And I've been walking for about 20 minutes. 4 ducks have passed me on duck tours. Ducks are vehicles that can travel on both road and water, and they were full of tourists. I've just got to a junction and I've noticed I've got back to South Station. Now, the South Station is a very interesting station, as I told you yesterday. The exterior architecture is magnificent, but it's undergoing a lot of work at the moment. There are 2 cranes sticking out of the roof, and then when you go into the concourse, it's full of a jumble of fast food and other outlets. It really isn't all that pleasant inside. Goodness me, I've just passed some public payphones. I think they're the first I've seen in the 2.5 weeks I've been here. They're actually erecting one of the cranes at this moment. There's a team working on it. And I've reached the water. You can smell the sea. I would say it's about half tide at the moment. Very touristy museum. Boston Tea Party ships and museum. Even fake hornpipe music playing. 3 men who've been on a fishing trip, just getting off the fishing boat. Bags laden. Looks like they've probably got a good catch. The area where I'm walking at the moment is called Atlantic Wharf, past the Intercontinental Hotel with its smart waterfront location. Small boats with people, I think, on tours around the harbour, taking advantage of the beautiful weather to be out on the water. I'm stood in front of a plaque which says, "Here formerly stood Griffith's Wharf, at which lay moored on December the 16th, 1773, 3 British ships with cargoes of tea. To defeat King George's trivial but tyrannical tax of 3p a pound, about 90 citizens of Boston, partly disguised as Indians, boarded the ships, threw the cargoes, 342 chests in all, into the sea, and made the world ring with the patriotic exploit of the Boston Tea Party." I'm down on a wharf where cruises appear to go from. There's a boat run like a Mississippi River boat. I think it must have got lost somewhere. All the cruise boats here don't seem to be operating today. You would have thought the weekend would be the time when they would make most of their money. And as an example of the really bad, the aquarium, I think, takes the prize. 1960s or 70s brutalist concrete with rust from the reinforcing bars seeping down the walls. I've walked a bit further along the waterfront and I've arrived in an area that is certainly thriving with cruise boats. I'm looking at the Custom House block. I'm walking down the backs of a row of houses here on the waterfront. One side of me, cars parked everywhere. The other side, one of the longest rows of air conditioning plants I've ever seen. I assume that each home has its own air conditioning. Some of the makes I've heard of, others I've never heard of. Also quite a few barbecues here. As I stand at the end of this quay, you can see planes coming into the airport just across the water from me. You can also smell the kerosene-like jet fuel that aircraft use. So when you're expecting to smell the sea, smell jet fuel, not the best thing. Tide is definitely ebbing. The gangplanks down to the boats are steeper. And I've been walking along a level ground all the way along the harbour front. I've just come up to a street that looks like it's still celebrating Christmas. Tinsely crowns and other tinsely items twinkling in the sunlight. Just walking along a building here. It's not particularly old, but it's the United States Coast Guard Service, Boston area. The older of the two buildings has a stone base and then brickwork above. 100, 150 years old, maybe a bit more. And now a playground area where authorised games only are permitted. Part of Boston's parks and recreation facilities. Just been passed by a couple of Boston trolley tour buses. They're made to look like old trolley buses, but of course they're not. They're modern vehicles, coach-sized with specialised bodywork, completely synthetic. Such a pity. And now I'm back onto the harbour side again. Quite an impressive bridge in front of me. Indeed, 3 bridges, one of which is still being built. I'm just stood opposite a building with a lovely name, Lovejoy Wharf. For those of you that like the old British comedy series about the antiques dealer, one wonders whether that's where the name came from. Just opposite the jetties used by the state police boats. Fast launches and ribs. I've now got to the North Station, which advertises commuter rail and Amtrak. I wonder which services Amtrak runs through this station. I'll go and have a look. I didn't realise that there was a third railway station here in Boston. Amtrak services seem to go to a place called Brunswick. There's a 3:45, a 5:20 and an 11:25 p.m. The 3:45 is now boarding. Train number 695, which goes through Haverhill, Exeter, Durham, Dover, Wells, Sacco, Old Orchard Beach, Portland, Freeport and Brunswick. First lot of all those places could have been in Britain. But then I suppose they were named after people from Britain.
May I have your attention, please? Amtrak Down Easter train number 695 with a 3:45 p.m. departure is now boarding on track 7 to Brunswick, making the following station stops: Haverhill, Exeter, Durham, Dover, Wells, Saco, Old Orchard Beach, Portland, Freeport, and Brunswick. Please be sure you have all of your personal belongings with you, and thank you for riding the Amtrak Down Easter.
I don't think this is a particularly busy station, because the next Amtrak arrival from Brunswick is at 9:05 p.m. and then the next one after that is at 7:50 a.m. Amtrak's Down Easter is now moving slowly out of the station. The locomotive you can hear is a local commuter service train. The Down Easter is being pulled by GE Genesis. I think I found the ugliest building that I've seen in a very long time. Absolute, pure, brutalist concrete from the 1960s. The building without one hint of charm. It's state property. I think it's the main entrance to the Department of Mental Health. It's horrible. It really is, without 1 ounce of charm. I suspect I was wrong in thinking that it's offices. It could very well be a hospital because it says ambulances and other authorised vehicles. And the parts that you think would be doorways aren't. That wasn't hooting at me, it was hooting at somebody just pulled out of a parking space. It's the Charles Hurley building as a couple of duck tours go past. Fire engine just hurtled past round the corner, and now an ambulance is appearing. The Charles S. Hurley building is full of different government offices. There's health, re-employment, unemployment assistance, and the Department of Labour Standards, which also deals with lead and asbestos licensing. But it is a horrible building. The parade of fast food outlets just opposite me. The famed Dunkin' Donuts, the sushi burrito, poke bowl and salad bowl, and then somewhere selling gourmet subs and pasta. And that looks the least appetising of the three. The City Hall, another depressing building from the late 60s or early 70s. They must have ripped the soul out of this city and rebuilt it. Such a pity. Here's a little bit of the city that hasn't been spoilt. The King's Chapel and the burying ground next to it. Some lovely trees growing. A bit of peace and beauty amongst the depressing buildings that appear to make up much of this city. A little bit further down the street, another oasis of trees. Again, a burying ground, the Granary burying ground. Notice he's asking, please stay off the grass. It's very patchy. The dappled sun on the ground, shining through the trees. A memorial in the middle to Benjamin Franklin. The headstones of people who died hundreds of years ago. A slice of Boston's history. In this tranquil place, the birds are singing. Even the traffic sounds muted, though I'm only yards from the street. Apparently in the 1700s, this wasn't a particularly good place for a graveyard. It was waterlogged. Coffins would float. But in that graveyard are the bodies of very famous people to do with the foundation of the United States of America. It really is a historical place. I've now found Boston Common, an open space since 1634. Large number of people here, including Daddy's Fried Dough, people selling ice cream and hot drinks, clothes, you name it, it's all here. You can get a sausage.
They don't use the gifts that God gave them to glorify God.
And of course,
Instead, they use it to glorify
the visiting
devil.
preacher.
Do not be deceived. What a man sows, he will also reap.
Interestingly, our preacher
When you take a life in the womb, you are destroying
is
life.
reading his
They
speech
say believe in the science.
from an
They don't
iPhone.
want to believe it.
I presume somebody's sending him the message of what to say. There are thousands of people here in the park enjoying a sunny Sunday afternoon. Children playing in the pool, splashing themselves and keeping cool. Trees providing shades and family groups sat on the grass. And a couple of musicians playing guitar music. Some people from Boston College doing some research into how children develop between the ages of 6 and 11. Well, there are plenty of subjects for them to talk to here. More musicians. There's a man advertising free hugs. I suppose that's one way to find new friends. So as I head back towards the hotel, pick up my luggage, get a taxi to the airport, it's possibly time to review the last 2.5 weeks. I've travelled through literally hundreds of cities. Though of course in Britain most of them would be small towns or villages. I've seen a number of big cities from the railway lines. And we must remember that trains very rarely go through the best part of town. And therefore it would be incorrect to judge the cities that I've only seen from the train. But the cities where I've stopped, where I've had a chance to look around. First was Miami. My couple of recovery days from the flight. Miami, to be honest, was a disappointment. Yes, I loved the Botanical Garden, but that was in Miami Beach. An incredibly expensive and wealthy area. But Miami itself, very 1960s, 70s buildings, particularly all the hotels, very like the Gold Coast in Australia. No architectural merit, nothing that you could be joyous about, though admittedly it did have the sea. I moved then to New York, where I only spent a night between my first 2 trains. I'd been to New York a good few times, and it's not really a city that I particularly enjoy. It's brash, it's noisy. The harbour, again, is very nice. But I didn't visit on this trip, because my hotel was only 3 blocks away from the station. We arrived in late, and it was an overnight, and I was off the next day, down to New Orleans, which is a truly beautiful city. In many ways, New Orleans is one of the nicest cities that I've encountered in the United States. And the Longview Garden was an experience. Then it was the quick hop over to Los Angeles. Now, Los Angeles is a surprise. Last time I was using Los Angeles as an overnighter. This time I had a few days in which to explore the city centre, the downtown area. It was buzzing. Really buzzing. The market was incredible. The people were friendly. And of course it has my favourite Union Station in it as well. Then on to the train for 3 nights. And our arrival into Chicago. An extremely comfortable night at the glorious Witt Hotel. And then a day spent walking the streets, going to the Millennium Park with the Lurie Garden in it. And the architectural river trip, which showed the splendour of Chicago's architecture. Then back to New York, another overnight, 3 blocks from the station, 3 blocks back to the station. And the Acela up to Boston, one of the most historical cities in the United States. A wonderful waterfront. This nice park. But the architecture of the city is so depressing. So much of the centre of the city has been ripped out and replaced in the 1960s and 70s with soulless, characterless buildings. But I have to say, it's been a really interesting holiday. I've done over 6,870 miles by train. I've been through states I'd never touched before. But now it's time to go home. The US Rail Journeys podcasts are produced and published by the Mr. T Podcast Studio. Sadly, this is the final podcast in the series. I hope you've enjoyed being with me for my 6,684-mile rail journeys across the United States with Amtrak. Thank you very much for listening.